Everyone. Today we are going to talk all about reading and specifically our beginning readers and the things that we have learned about teaching beginning readers. I have the awesome Amy Janjagava here joining us, and Justine Ferrelli is coming right on in. Yay. Welcome back, everyone. So excited that you guys are here, and we're talking about one of my favorite things, which is reading tutoring, specifically our beginning reader. What are some of the things that you have learned about these beginning readers, Amy?
For me, and when I taught kindergarten, I realized there were a lot of things that were, for example, we have in Texas, the TEKS. There's certain standards that we have to follow. Every state has their own. And, I never understood the connection between like phonological awareness, specifically the phonemic awareness. There were a lot of PH words that I was like, I don't really know what they mean, and I don't know how they connect. And so it was just interesting that I was teaching, but I didn't understand the connection. I knew we were supposed to teach that, but then I also knew we were supposed to teach the other PH, which is phonics, but I never saw the connection between what's the point and why is it important. And so being able to not only go through the training for becoming a dyslexia therapist, it let me understand how these things connect together. Mm-hmm. And, I had never been taught that in a way that made sense, that, had purpose. So the thing that I have really learned, and that's kind of where my focus of my business has been recently, is that really having that solid foundation. And it starts before letters happen. I tell parents that if I have a word that's, plant, if a child can't blend together without the letters, you're making it even more difficult when you have a letter in front of you and you have to think of the sound and you have to articulate the sound properly. And so it's these little things that I think we just take for granted. I mean, I'm 39 years old, you don't really think about all of what's going on, but reading can be a difficult process, especially if you skip over something. And so I have learned taking a step back, and I always tell my students, in order to go fast, you have to start slow. And so we have to slow down and get the fundamental foundational stuff correct. Mm-hmm. And so being able to articulate sounds correctly, blend sounds correctly together, starting with just like 3 sounds, 3 phonemes, maybe expanding into 5. Then if they're able to hold that information and blend those sounds together, then we can add the next layer of letters and start understanding it.
It's so funny because I was just talking to my mother-in-law about this process, and I said, our brains aren't wired to read, but when I work with a kid who's struggling with reading, like somebody who's dyslexic or even someone who isn't dyslexic, I can actually rewire their brain so that they're prepared to read. And she's like, mm-hmm. What? You can really do that? And that's what phonemic awareness is, right? Like that, mm-hmm. It's the rewiring of the brain so that it can start hearing those sounds and putting them together. So many parents, I find, they say things like, my kid really struggles with being able to blend words. And it's like, okay, let's back up. Let's see if it could be because they just can't blend the sounds yet. Or is it they don't know the sounds of the letters? Like one of those two things is going on for them usually. And if we can figure that out, then you can start closing that gap faster. What are some things that you've learned, Justine, about these beginning readers?
Okay, so yes, and I just want to add a little bit on to me, because I had mentioned that, I hadn't really explicitly taught reading before in the classroom. And before I was in the Italian immersion school, I was actually in Waldorf. So that was my introduction to teaching, because it really resonated with me. And so I started when my first daughter was born, and that is a whole language approach. And so the idea in that is that learning to read is natural, and it's just going to happen naturally. And it could happen early, it could happen later, it could happen even when they're in middle school, but it's all natural. And I bought into that and I loved it because I love the whole Waldorf system. However, later as I made my journey, first into the Italian and then now just becoming a full-time reader, I switched. So the pendulum for me went from, buying into the whole everything Waldorf and then going this way now towards phonics. And so for me, just learning how to teach phonics and phonemic awareness has been really empowering. Again, just like how teaching writing was empowering for me, now I feel really empowered with this because I understand it. It makes sense. It's logical. I don't buy in anymore to that reading is natural and it's just going to happen. I mean, I do think that's possible for like a small percentage, but for the most part, I believe that about 80% of all children would need a more explicit and direct and systematic approach. And so that's why I love teaching this way.